hook when I signed the papers for that old, forgotten cabin deep in the pine hills of Vermont. I thought I was buying peace, silence, nature, and a place to rebuild after losing everything. I didn't expect a furious neighbor banging on my door, shouting that I had stolen her son's inheritance. But what I discovered hidden beneath the rotting floors of that cabin, and the truth about who really owned it, changed both of our lives forever. The snow was still falling when I turned down the narrow, unpaved road that led to the cabin. My windshield wipers screeched across a crust of frost, struggling to keep up. I remember thinking how poetic it was. A broken man driving toward a broken home. Just 6 months earlier, my life had been everything it wasn't now. A steady job in Boston, an apartment with warm lights and the smell of cinnamon coffee every morning shared with my wife Hannah. But cancer doesn't care about routines or love stories. When she passed, the city became unbearable. Every sound echoed with her laughter. Every street reminded me of her smile. So I sold everything. I needed silence. Somewhere old, untouched. Somewhere that didn't remember her. That's when I found it. A 150-year-old log cabin listed for just $30,000. Needs work, the listing said. That was an understatement. The roof sagged like tired shoulders. The porch leaned forward as if trying to flee. The house, and ivy strangled the brick chimney, like time itself wanted to erase it. But the moment I saw it, something in me stirred. Maybe it was the way the morning light hit the frosted glass windows, or the old oak standing guard beside it. It felt like a place that wanted to be remembered. When I arrived, the property was quiet. The snow crunched under my boots as I stepped out of the truck. The air smelled like pine and smoke, even though no fire had burned there for years. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. Inside was a scene from another century, dust thick as fog, spiderwebs like curtains, and furniture that looked handcrafted but forgotten. My flashlight beam caught on a photograph above the fireplace. A young man in a soldier's uniform, his smile faded by time. On the back, the writing was barely legible. Elias, 1873. I didn't know it then, but that name would haunt my days and dreams for months. As I began restoring the cabin, it became a ritual. Each day, I stripped away a layer of decay and uncovered something beautiful. Heartwood beams still, strong after a century, hand-carved notches in the window frames, initials burned into the mantel. It was like the cabin was telling me stories, whispering secrets in the creak of every board. Then one morning, just as I was sanding the porch railing, a voice pierced the silence. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" I looked up to see a woman in a red parka, her blonde hair stiff with hairspray, and her expression even stiffer. She marched across my snow-covered yard like she owned the mountain. "I'm sorry," I said, lowering my sander. "You can't be here," she snapped. "That cabin belongs to the Caldwell estate. It's not for sale. My son is supposed to inherit it." Her voice cracked the air like a whip. I blinked. "Ma'am, I bought this legally. I have the deed right here." She folded her arms. "That deed is fake. My family's owned this property for generations." That was the first time I met Karen Caldwell, the self-proclaimed president of the local HOA, an OA that apparently didn't even include my property. Her words rattled me more than I wanted to admit. I double-checked everything. The title was clean. The seller was legitimate. Still, there was something in her eyes, not greed, but fear. Later that evening, as I was packing up my tools, I noticed something strange. A corner of the old floorboards near the fireplace was loose. Beneath it, I found a rusted tin box tied shut with twine. Inside was a faded letter dated 1875, signed by someone named Elias Caldwell. My heart pounded as I read the first line. "If you are reading this, the Caldwell legacy must remain protected, even from my own blood." The cabin suddenly didn't feel so empty anymore. I sat by the dying fire, the letter trembling in my hands. The ink had bled into the paper with time, but the words still carried weight. The kind of weight that clings to your chest like a secret no one should know. "If you are reading this, the Caldwell legacy must remain protected, even from my own blood." Who was Elias Caldwell protecting the cabin from? And why had Karen, the woman who stormed onto my property that morning, claimed it was her son's inheritance? The next day, curiosity won over caution. I drove into town to the county records office, a cramped, dusty building that smelled faintly of mildew and old books. The clerk, a woman named Maggie, squinted through her glasses as I handed her the deed. Caldwell Estate, you say? She murmured, typing slowly on a yellowed keyboard. Well, this land has a long paper trail. Looks like the original deed was issued in 1870 to an Elias Caldwell. After that, there's a gap. Oh, here. She frowned. There's a transfer in 1901, but it wasn't to a Caldwell. It was sold to a local craftsman, James Holloway. That's the name on your chain of title. So it's not theirs anymore? I asked. She shook her head. Hasn't been for over a century. That should have been the end of it. But as I left the office, I couldn't shake the image of Karen's face, not angry, but desperate. That night, I returned to the cabin, determined to learn more about Elias. The storm outside was fierce, and the wind howled through the chimney like a ghost trying to speak. I laid the letter out on the kitchen table and studied it under the flickering light. Beneath the first line, the rest read, "They covet what they did not earn. This land holds more than wood and stone. It holds our truth. Should greed find it again, may the heart of this home rest with the worthy." I didn't know what truth he meant, but I knew there was more hidden beneath that cabin. For days I searched, behind loose boards, under floor planks, even in the fireplace. And then, in the far corner of the cellar, half buried in dirt, I found it, a small wooden chest. Inside lay a bundle of old photographs, a military medal, and a leather journal, its cover cracked but intact. The journal was Elias's, and as I read his words, his story unfolded like a mirror to my own. He had built the cabin after returning from war, hoping for peace. But his family, wealthy landowners, disapproved. They called him a disgrace for choosing a simple life. His brother, in particular, wanted the land for profit. Elias refused, leaving a will that gave the estate not to his family, but to anyone who would care for it, restore it, and protect it. Suddenly, everything made sense. Elias had wanted the cabin to belong to someone who would love it, not exploit it. That was the inheritance, not money, not land, but a legacy of care. When Karen returned a few days later, I was ready. She pulled up in her shiny SUV, her face already tight with anger. "I told you this is Caldwell land," she said. "My great-grandfather built this place." I held out the journal. "Your great-grandfather didn't build it, Karen. He tried to take it. Elias did. And he left it for someone who would protect it, not for greed, not for family pride, but for love." Her expression faltered. "That's not true." I opened the journal to a page marked with a ribbon and read aloud, "If the blood of Caldwell forgets love, let the heart of a stranger remind them what home means." Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't know," she whispered. We stood in silence for a long time, the only sound the wind rattling through the pines. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled through the tears. "Maybe he was right," she said softly. "Maybe someone else was meant to find it." From that day forward, everything changed. Karen stopped fighting me. In fact, she started helping, bringing old photos, family records, even donating materials to help finish the restoration. As we worked side by side, I saw her differently. She wasn't just a Karen. She was a woman clinging to what she thought her family had lost. By the time spring came, the cabin stood proud again. The roof was new, the walls polished to a golden hue, the fireplace roaring like it had been waiting for warmth all those years. And one evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Karen joined me on the porch. "Elias would be proud," she said quietly. "I think so too," I replied. She smiled. "You know, maybe that's what inheritance really is, not money or land, but learning how to care for what others forgot." I looked out at the pines swaying in the wind and felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. For the first time since Hannah's passing, I felt alive again. The cabin wasn't just restored. I was. Moral. Sometimes what we inherit isn't property or power, it's purpose. And when we learn to restore what's broken, we end up rebuilding ourselves.